Hey guys, and welcome back to Exo Medical Spa. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the jawline and the neck and how they coincide together. So we'll talk about why it's occurring, why we're getting jowls, why we're getting laxity in the neck, and some of the treatments that we can think about when we come back. When we think about the jawline, the common thing that people hate the most is this jowl. So when this jowl starts coming down, we try to think about fillers to mask it. We think about threads to lift the area. But then the jowl also incorporates this upper neck portion. And what do I mean by that? When you treat this upper face, if you've ever done fillers in the past, you've ever done threads in the past, or even say some Botox, you're never quite to completion. And in your head, you're like, well, I've done everything that you've asked me to. I've done fillers. I've done threads to pick up this area. Maybe I've done some Cabela to melt the fat away in this jowl area. Why do I still am not happy with the jawline? Why do I still see jowls? And then now I'm a little bit unhappy in the neck as well. Let's figure out the causes. I think I've discussed this previously, but this jawline, what happens is when we age, we lose a couple things. We lose bone, notching here. You notch out those two areas and there you go. There's the jowl. We lose fat. We lose fat around our face that naturally holds up our skin, and the skin descends and sits on this area. Number two, now, what does my neck have to do with my jawline? You guys can probably see it. See that little rounding right there? And then also, see when I flex? Platysmal bands. That little pudge right there is your submandibular gland. With aging, with laxity, this gland begins to descend and fall, just like everything else. Skin, fat, muscle, everything becomes lax, and you start seeing a rounding there. So now instead of having a solid jawline, it starts rounding in this area. If you know people who have had neck lifts, you'll probably see it more prominent. And then if you see people who don't have a lot of fat in their neck, it doesn't hide it as well. Because once you lift and tuck this skin, it will push up against that submandibular gland. And then lastly, these platysmal bands, they're always present, but as we get older, we lose fat, the bands protrude more, the bands descend, and the bands separate. So this used to be tucked in way here, begins to separate, and you see that as well. And this band pulls down right on the jowl, around the back of our neck. So again, that's pulling down on our jawline, rounding it off and decreasing that sharpness that we want. So what we perceive as a singular area happens all up here because of falling, happens all down here because of pulling down. Fillers to blend, fillers to lift, PDO threads to lift, collagen stimulating products to tighten the skin. But we can't forget about the lower portion of the jaw. We have to reduce these platysmal bands with Botox. You can also get them removed surgically or they just snip them. And then this submandibular gland. If you have a very enlarged submandibular gland, you'll see this rounding effect. And what you can do is shoot Botox as well as the platysmal bands. And when I say Botox, Dysport, Xeum, and Jawls to atrophy that gland, meaning we're trying to shrink that gland over time. And then the bands, we want to atrophy that muscle. So unlike wrinkle Botox that reduces wrinkles because we're atrophying the muscle, what we're trying to do here is actually shrink the muscle. If you can imagine this was like your biceps, this was like your quads. If you worked it out every single day, the muscle gets bigger, and that tension pulls down on your lower face, pulls down on your jowls, pulls down on your jawline. But if you stopped working out that muscle, you stopped doing curls, you stopped doing squats, your legs, your arms take time to shrink. So you may not see a result right away because it takes time for that muscle to shrink and atrophy. As a recap, jawline happens a couple reasons. Bone loss, fat loss, collagen loss, skin laxity, all settles into certain places. Fillers to lift, fillers to blend and contour, PDO threads to lift and produce better collagen and lifting of the skin. Lastly, we can treat the upper, but don't forget the bottom. Face, everything falls. Here, everything pulls down. So treat the platysmal bands to keep that tension from pulling down on your face. And if necessary, this rounding right here, this submandibular gland, shoot Botox as well to shrink everything. So treat the top, treat the bottom, treat the total picture, and make sure your provider goes through all this with you. Because what you perceive as jowls, what you perceive as jawline, takes a multitude of different treatments to get you to where you want to be. So I'll see you guys on the next episode of XO Medical Spa.